Good evening. Welcome to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauber. I'm an employment law and business law attorney, and I host this live weekly talk radio show and this live video broadcast every Tuesday night from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on Talk Radio NYC, where I have guests who discuss some of the most interesting and novel challenges that employers and business owners are facing today during these trying times. And in the spirit of novel, innovative, and insightful guests, I'm very pleased today to have a surprise special guest tonight, the Reverend Dr. Terlyn Curry Avery, aka the Reverend Dr. TLC. Terlyn, welcome to the show.
Sorry, I'm a little delayed with unmuting. Thank you, Eric, for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Happy to have you as well. Yes, it's been quite an intro and a few tech issues, miscellaneous matters, but hopefully everyone can hear me okay. My volume's going well? Great.
Yeah.
All right. Yes, it's good to have you back. Terlyn and I think have been on each other's shows on the station. We've talked about implicit bias in the workplace and I think dismantling racism in the workplace for employers. We talk about issues of healing from the traumas of spiritually afflicted wounds or spiritual healing. And Terlyn has an excellent show every Thursday, right?
Thursdays at 11 o'clock in the morning, Eastern time.
Right. Eastern
Yes.
time, this is the
Yes.
racism, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just happy to have you on, and I'll just tell our guests a little bit about you, including the fact that you've had a book out since your last visit to my show. But why don't I give our guests a little bit of a brief background, if I may, so you know who we're talking to here. Does that work?
That works.
Okay, so my guest tonight, as I mentioned, the Reverend Dr. Terlyn L. Curry Avery. The Reverend Dr. TLC is the creator of Pestology, the cutting-edge field that focuses on the synergy between pastoring and psychology. She holds a BS from Howard University, a PhD from Hofstra University, my law school alma mater, and a Master's of Divinity from Yale University. She calls herself a pastologist, a licensed psychologist, and ordained minister, and is a transformational leader, coach, speaker, author, and retreat leader. Reverend Dr. TLC has a unique approach to healing, transformation, and manifestation. She places the emphasis on the journey towards sacred intelligence, the ability to tap into one's internal source in order to move toward intelligent choices. These choices are intended to honor the sacred and help the individual manifest their greatness while simultaneously embracing the humanity of those around them. The Reverend Dr. TLC works with highly influential and committed leaders who need spiritual life or career coaching as they transform the world by creating a legacy of service, prosperity, and greatness. She also provides coaching support for leaders to help them understand how their sphere of influence can help to change the status quo and to dismantle structures that have intentionally and unintentionally created racial disparities. Her coaching provides an opportunity for leaders to create the right context for conversations on race and leadership development with their employees, and to discover how racism and unconscious bias influence their hiring practices and affect their clients and have a direct impact on the company's financial goals. Reverend Dr. TLC has a long history of working with institutions, organizations, and communities to bridge the racial divide and to promote racial equity. And lastly, she is, as I mentioned, the host of Dismantle Racism with the Reverend Dr. TLC, which airs on Talk Radio NYC, the station. She's also the author of Dismantling Racism, Healing Separation from the Inside Out, and Sacred Intelligence, the Essence of Sacred, Selfish, and Shared Relationships. Reverend Dr. TLC is the pastor of Martin Luther King Jr. Community Presbyterian Church in Springfield, Massachusetts. All right, and so I feel like our audience really ought to know you by now. We have a really good comprehensive intro background. It's really great to hear that, to share that with our audience rather, and to hear as well. And it's interesting, Terlyn. Like I was thinking about the show tonight, and this kind of topic of purpose, right? Of executive leadership, helping employees, helping their managers, helping people to find their purpose and to do so, in a safe environment, a safe context. We talk about this issue, I think, a lot, and I hear it from different people. But really, we're talking about the fact that a lot of companies focus on their mission or the company purpose. But in order to really be successful as a company, You have to nurture and cultivate your employees' process, right? And how they explore and grow into their own individual purpose and their own vision so that they can be happier, more productive, more successful. And of course, these issues come up in terms of how there are nuances around women in leadership and
Mhm.
people of color, right? And how the messages that they might receive may impact whether or not they feel comfortable and safe in stepping into their own greatness, their vision, their purpose. So
Mhm.
with that, I thought I would uh, sort of open up maybe with a question about purpose, if I may. And of course, I want to hear about your book and everything you're doing. But my my question for you really comes down to how do you define like purpose driven or personal mission as it applies to say to the company's employees and workers? Like, what do you think about the individual purpose, how that unfolds?
Mm, mm. That's a great question. And so I really want to answer it before thinking about the company. I want to answer it where the individual
Sure.
takes a
Yeah.
moment to think about themselves. So, of course, my background is as a pastor and it's also as a psychologist. So I'm always talking about purpose. And I believe that people should engage in employment that feeds their soul, that feeds their
Mm,
spirit. And so you might say, well, I don't know what my purpose is. I just wanted a job. And that's why I
mm,
started working with this company.
mm,
I would invite those individuals, though, to think about what are the things that are meaningful to you? What are your values? What are your goals that you want in life? And what's your own personal mission?
mm,
Because you have to figure out whether the company that you're working for is in alignment with your goals and with your
mm,
mission and with your values. So you began to kind of think about, well, why was I put here on this earth for?
mm,
We're all here for a particular reason. There's something for us to accomplish. So
mm,
we take a step back. We evaluate whether this thing that I'm doing, is it something that I could do for hours on
mm.
end and not like time has elapsed because I'm enjoying it so much.
Right.
That's the first sort of thing that I would ask people to think about. And then to ask people, what am I really good at? If you're having a hard time thinking about what your gifts, your talents are, ask other people, what am I good with? And then
Mm,
spending time in that sort of sacred space of
mhm.
saying, what feeds me? When you know that,
Yeah.
what feeds you, and then when you're able to define what your values are,
Mhm.
then you can take them to the company.
Hmm.
When you're able to do, and what I mean by that, it's not like you have to go and talk to the CEO about
Yeah.
what's going on with you. You could talk to the next person, like your supervisor,
Mhm.
if you are engaged in work that doesn't seem like it's in alignment with who you are.
Yeah.
Now, to answer your question then about how companies then should actually support their
Mhm.
member, their employees. If I have someone working for me in my company and they come and they talk to me about what their mission is, what their values are, their purpose is, it
Mhm.
would behoove me to
Mm.
see if the work that I am giving them is something that's going to lead to greater productivity in the
Yes.
company, because that's
Mhm.
what you want to make sure of. And are they happy? Are they
Mhm.
mentally well? Right? Or are they feeling unseen, unheard? And is
Right.
it just another job for them? If an employer makes sure that their employees are happy,
Mhm.
it really will be an advantage for the company itself.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
it's very, very important. Now, how does this
Yes.
relate to women and how does it relate to people of color?
Mm. That was my next question for you, actually, but you segued into nicely. Yes, exactly. Mhm.
So oftentimes,
Mhm.
women don't feel like they are heard. We get paid
Mhm.
less
Mhm.
most often.
Yes.
And in particular, people of color, when we are in places where there are especially only a few of us
Mhm.
represented at the table, we get
Yes.
looked over often for the position, or
Mhm.
our ideas are not valued. We
Mm.
feel stifled. Our gifts are not being used adequately.
Mhm.
So ultimately, when people feel unseen and unheard,
Mhm.
They began looking for jobs elsewhere,
Mhm.
or they don't put their all into the job, which
Yeah.
ultimately hurts the company. And this is the thing that I talk to
Mhm.
companies about often: the amount of days that people take off because
Mm.
they're sick. And I mean,
Right.
sometimes actually sick, not just psychologically, like
Sure.
making up stuff, or not just emotionally making up stuff. I
Right.
mean,
Like
like
physical virus. So yeah. Mhm.
physical, but the psychological and the emotional is just as important as well,
Yeah.
because those things lead to people taking off work as well, and it creates problems. And then people have to go to the doctors, and health insurance goes up. So it's a ripple effect.
Yeah, Trella, Doctor, absolutely. I mean, I hear a couple of things there, right? Really good points you're making. I hear about, like the individual, sort of the importance of, focusing, examining, introspection. What are one's values? What are you good at? What are your gifts and talents? And also, I like you said about, if you're not sure, you can ask other people, right? What do you see, right, in me? And listen for the common theme. Someone says, well, you're very passionate, right? You're very outspoken. You're very, creative, very courageous. To hear that, so that if a person maybe isn't quite ready to take it in, like, they can, it's like, trust other people, borrow their opinion of you, and
Mhm.
then, right, have that, sit with that, process it, and kind of grow into it, own it. But then, like, the second part of this equation, that the company, especially we're talking about purpose in the employment realm, since it's employment law today, right? The company has to create, a safe place for the person to express themselves. And to your other point, a company benefits when it's flexible, right? If it's rigid, no, sorry, we hired you, as assistant accounts payable, and that's where you are, and that's where you'll stay. Um, if the company has other positions open, and this is something I tell my clients a lot. I have, business owners and, companies that represent employment law issues, that often, if we talk about the employment laws that apply, but also the business practices. And we say, if you have an employee that's feeling, as you mentioned, unseen, unheard, stifled, not represented at the table, they're going to develop some resentment. They're not going to perform as well. You're going to be clashes, and maybe there'll be some implicit bias, underlying some of the tone of those clashes. And maybe you'll find yourself on the other end of a discrimination complaint, which is lose-lose for everybody. So, I think you raised some really good points there about, and then to bring it back to women and people of color, women of color, right? The importance of a company giving people that space, to stay what they want. And I think our society often tells women and people of color, right, that they're not entitled to the full, sadly, value, right, that other people, get, that they should be somehow just fortunate, lucky that, they're, in this cushy position, as if the implication being that, a man could have taken that spot, or a white man. So I think that's really, I don't know if that's part of what you're saying, but that's what I hear. And,
Mhm.
putting that out there to the universe as well,
Yes, yes.
Mhm.
And Erica, I would love to. I know you're going to have to take a break very shortly, but I would love to, when we come back, to really give a good example of an employer listening to one of his employees and how it actually benefited him really powerfully. So,
That sounds like a great segue into a commercial break, and then to come back with that, the suspense and the story that people want to hear. So if you're listening here to Talk Radio NYC, you're listening to or watching Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauber, employment law attorney. My guest tonight, the Reverend Dr. Pathologist, Dr. Turlin, Curry and Green, aka Reverend Dr. TLC. When we come back, we're going to talk more about finding purpose, evolving purpose with employees. And we'll hear the story of an employer doing just that. So stick around. We'll be right back.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business, or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant. And on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you on edge? Hey, we live in challenging, edgy times, so let's lean in. I'm Sandra Bargman, the host of The Edge of Every Day, which airs each Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc. Tune in live with me and my friends and colleagues as we share stories and perspectives about pushing boundaries and exploring our rough edges. That's The Edge of Every Day on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauber. Our guest tonight, the Reverend Dr. Charlene Curry Avery, who has her own show, Dismantling Racism, on this very station on Thursdays at 11 a.m. Did I say that correctly?
Yes, you did. 11
Great.
a.m.
Yes.
Eastern Time. Mhm.
That's right. Eastern Time. I always mention that too, because we have listeners all over the country and even other nations. So it was really great to have you on again, Dr. TLC FMA. We've been on the show before, and I've been a guest on your show, you've been a guest on my show, and just great to talk about these issues. So you left us off in a cliffhanger before the commercial of having an employer, I think you said, or a business owner who.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Curious to hear about.
so remember how could you not remember, but in 2020, when we had this surge of people throwing money out there on to Black institutions, because after George Floyd was murdered, and we just had a lot of people saying, here's money, 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 money. And my thing has always been, you have to do more than throw money at the situation. Yes, the money is it's valuable.
Sure.
But what else do you need to do? How do we change the structure? How do we change the system? And how do we begin to look and hear our Black and brown employees? So my understanding, now I don't know this part for a fact, but Ralph Lauren was talking to his employees in a meeting, and probably the high level ones, I'm guessing, or thereabouts. And he was talking with them about race and that he wanted to do more to make sure that he was recognizing the Black and brown culture. So your guests can actually go to YouTube. There is a trailer called Ralph Lauren, a portrait of the American dream. And what he did, so in that particular meeting, my understanding is there were people of color who voiced their opinions about what was going on in the world and what their lives were like. And he really sat and he really listened to it. And then he took into consideration, I don't know which employee it was, who gave him all these good ideas about some things that he could do. So in this trailer, A Portrait of an American Dream, what Ralph Lauren does is he goes to two historically Black colleges and universities. He went to Morehouse College and Spelman College, and he looked at the clothing, a lot of it, some of his stuff, but he did look at the clothing that they wore from way back in the day, as we would say, time. Brilliant, because what it did is it showed that he paid attention to us and our culture. And he recognized that we also support his industry. So from the perspective as a business owner, he actually just increased the number of people who are going to go out and buy paraphernalia for their organizations, for
Yeah.
their colleges and universities, if Ralph Lauren is, his name is associated with some of this stuff.
Mhm.
So he just kept his business. But what he also did was he listened to his employees
Mhm. Mhm.
and who were coming up with creative designs as well for him. And these are people who are still able to live their purpose, and their purpose is in alignment with their values. So maybe a person is into fashion, but they also want to ensure that there's racial equity in the world.
Mhm.
So for each of us, when we're thinking about our passion and our purpose, we also, I keep taking it back to our values, because Eric, one of the things that I see is that, for instance, white people may say that I'm not a racist, or I believe that we're all equal, blah, blah, blah. Great. It's great to believe it. But now what are you doing where your behavior is in alignment with that? And so I think whatever our purpose is, we have to make sure, just like I do with any other issue that's going on out here, right? So if I say that I'm concerned about women's rights or LGBTQIA rights, what am I doing that to be in alignment? Because my purpose is to create equity, right?
Yes.
So racial equity in particular, but I want equity for everyone. So what am I doing about it?
Right. Yeah, it's interesting too. And Ralph Lauren, little known business owner there. People may have heard of him, perhaps, or heard of the company. But I think absolutely, Carolyn. I think it's a great example, great story there. Everything, and what I hear from that story too are a few things, right? Number one, the idea of being asked questions, hearing someone's experience, how that gives them a sense of value and purpose right there, because they feel as if they're not just, sort of a cog in the wheel, that they're actually being valued and listened to and seen. But also the idea that this is not not a zero-sum game. It's not as if one person wins and the other one loses. When you invest in your employees' purpose and equity, which is related topic here, it's a win-win, right? I think a lot of companies think that oh, these are just quote unquote woke progressive folks who are trying to take from the company and give it all to the employees. And the thing is, these measures, like having open dialogue and communications and talking to people and getting their perspective, it doesn't cost anything. And even if there are ever some kind of, say, cost involved, let's say was creating certain programs, set up in the company for employees, it's the value, it's an investment. So what you get back in terms of worker satisfaction, right? Worker productivity. And I tell my clients a lot when they ask me, some of my clients really are great about treating their workers well, and others will ask me questions like, what's the minimum amount of time I have to give them off under the law? Do I have to give vacation days? Do I, in this state, do I have to give, and I'll explain New York state law, but also say, you might be able, under the limits of the law, the minimum to give, 5 days in a year, let's say, sick pay, paid sick leave, but you're losing a lot in terms of employee burnout, in terms of frustration, in terms of exhaustion, fatigue, illness. So, why not offer like 3 weeks or 4 weeks of paid time off in the year? Why not offer more and get more back? So I think it's kind of in line, right? What you're saying there is interesting.
I just want to chime in on that, because it's so great that you offer that to them, because if I'm happy on the job, I won't want to take off anyway, because I want to be at work, doing what it is that I love to do.
Right. Like you and I love what we do. I know I love, practicing law, being an attorney, practicing employment law. It's like, my wife and I and our son, we take vacations, but sometimes the time between vacations kind of goes quickly because, like, oh, I'm enjoying what I do each day. Yes. Now, I'll be honest, there are times when life gets stressful and work gets, cranked up to 9, the volume for weeks, and there's other stuff happening. And sometimes, vacation can't come soon enough, but it's not because of lack of fulfillment, right? It's not because I'm, clocking in, clocking out, looking at the clock, can't wait to get home. And I know, I'm sure for you too, when you see, clients of yours and, your jobs, I love that phrase too, pastologist, that pastor psychologist blend.
Yes.
So that's, that's terrific. But yeah, it's like interesting too. It kind of takes me to a question, just in line with this, I think, really about, well, we talked about this a little bit, the benefits, to a company in investing in each employee's purpose, like why it's worth their time and money. Do you see a similar value as, say, investment in a company's like diversity and inclusion program, DEI initiatives? Do you see like how that may increase an environment where people can live their purpose?
I absolutely do.
Me too.
Because again, as we talked about, when you feel like you're not seen,
Mhm.
at some point, what happens is if I'm working for a company and I know that my purpose is one thing, but you
Mhm.
want to relegate me to this thing over here because you can't see my
Mhm.
brilliance because you're looking at my color or my
Mhm.
gender.
Mhm.
At some point, I'm not going to give you my all, as we've
Mhm.
been talking about. And
Yes.
so what I will see is, well, I don't need to come up with an idea because they're going to overlook me anyway. Why should I bother? And there are plenty of people
Mhm.
out there who stay in positions like that. And I want to tell your listeners, if you're in a place like that where you're not heard, it's time
Yeah.
for you to go somewhere
Yeah.
else.
Mhm.
But because I think we all should live our purpose. I believe that each of us has greatness inside of us, and we're meant to manifest our fullest potential while we're here. And if that is not happening, we need to move to something else. Because think about if you stifle your creativity, think about all the people in the world who are not benefiting from you living your purpose.
Right.
So don't get caught up in the money aspect. I know people need a job, yes.
Yeah.
But there are things that you can do. You absolutely can get another job, or you can become an entrepreneur like I did. And have your own business. There are things that people can do. And so when I think about for employers with people of color, really having conversations with people about, are you happy here? What would you do here if you had your choice? How can, even in your position, how can I ensure that you're doing something where you feel fed, where you feel nourished? Okay. Now, Eric, look, it has to start with the culture, right?
Yeah.
Because if it's a big company, obviously the president, CEO, CEO, they can't go to people, every individual person, and say, are you happy
Sure.
here? But
Yeah.
they can create a culture where they're making sure that people are seen and heard and valued,
Yes.
and create a space where they're listening to people with their ideas about things, even in their department. Sometimes folks don't even want to move out of their departments. They love what they're doing, but they're saying there's an easier way to do this, perhaps, a creative way of doing this. So just being able to listen and then giving credit to the right people for coming up with the idea.
I think that's very true. I think, we talk about and we hear about this phenomenon of quiet quitting, right? If you read about that, it's sort of the people essentially basically just the old term of phoning it in, right? They're doing the bare minimum that they have to do not to get fired. And people want to, well, everyone has different views. Some people I've heard opine that, it's a generational thing, and I don't agree with this at all, that it's a lazy generation of young folks who don't take things for granted. I don't think it's that. I think it's like people, as you mentioned, aren't either living their purpose or feeling fulfilled at work. Whether that means, switching roles or making the most of their role they have right now, or finding a new work-life balance in their schedules so they can do, let's say, a passion of theirs, off the clock in the evenings and weekends and holidays and such. But I think that this quiet quitting happens because, companies aren't used to, as you mentioned, creating a culture where people feel safe enough to express what they need. And the truth is that like the company suffers when morale is down. When morale is up, the company benefits. So we actually leave it at our next commercial break. But when we come back, I'll talk more with the Reverend Dr. TLC about this idea of creating purpose for your employees and helping them evolve, and how women and people of color, and especially, are treated in the workplace around this issue. So stick around to Employment Law Today. Our guest tonight, Reverend Dr. Terlin Curry-Avery. We'll be right back.
Are you passionate about the conversation around racism? Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. TLC, host of the Dismantle Racism Show, which airs every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc. Join me and my amazing guests as we discuss ways to uncover, dismantle, and eradicate racism. That's Thursdays at 11 o'clock a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a small business trying to navigate the COVID-19 related employment laws? Hello, I'm Eric Sauber, employment law, business law attorney, and host of the new radio show, Employment Law Today. On my show, we'll have guests to discuss the common employment law challenges business owners are facing during these trying times. Tune in on Tuesday evenings from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
Hey, everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy and Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauber, and our guest tonight, the Reverend Dr. Terlin Curry-Avery, pathologist, author, speaker, and host of the weekly Talk Radio NYC radio show and video broadcast, Dismantling Racism. So, Terlin, I realize that we're talking about purpose and individuals finding their purpose and so living it out as well, talking about racism and equity and inclusion. And it kind of brings up to me the fact that when you were on my show, I think it was about a year ago, it was November, October 2021, maybe November around this time, I think we talked about your upcoming book. And that was upcoming back in 2021. And I believe it's been out because I remember you shared this with me once a while back. So I'm curious if you can share with us maybe a little bit about your book, like the title, where we can get it, but also how that relates to the topic tonight.
So my book is Dismantling Racism, Healing Separation from the Inside Out. And it came out in April of this year, 2022. You can get it on Amazon. You can go to my website at sacredintelligence.com, which will loop you right back over to Amazon anyway, and pick up a copy of it as well. Eric, what's really interesting about the book is it's a call to action for predominantly for white people, but for people of color as well, in a different sort of way for people of color. But it's really about being committed to this work of racial equity. It doesn't matter what your job is to be committed. So you're a lawyer. How do you apply these things how do you apply racial equity to the work that you do? It's really what we're talking about in the book. Like, do more than just throw the money at the situation, but say, how does this align with who I am? So I discussed in the book 3 pillars. One being, what's your why? Why do you want to engage in the work of racial equity? So I talk about it from the standpoint of what's your sacred motive? What are you called to do in this moment in time? Because understand that when we talk about purpose, our purpose could change over time. We grow and we evolve. And so at this period, my purpose might be, for instance, to work on the wounds of religion.
Mhm.
Now it might be to look at dismantling racism, or it could be to do both because, hey, I'm a pastor. So obviously I hope that I'm healing some wounds of religion as a
Sure.
pastor, but I'm also working on dismantling racism. So as a leader, as a
Yes.
transformational leader, one must ask the question about the job that they're doing, vocation that they're doing. Is this something that feeds my soul? And now, as it's feeding my soul, how
Mhm.
am I helping to manifest greatness in other people?
Yes.
And so in my book, I'm talking about this idea of searching yourself to say, why do
Mhm.
I want to engage in this work? Because a lot of people came out in 2020, they were rah, rah, rah. I want to
Right.
help heal the world. And now
Mhm.
they've gone back to business as usual. So the
Mm.
book actually says, how can we heal this problem? How can we stand up to what's going on in the world, do
Mhm.
our jobs that we do, but
Mhm.
also incorporate dismantling racism? The second thing I do in the book is I discuss
Mhm.
this idea of a selfish mindset. And
Mhm.
what I mean by that is going inward
Mhm.
to take a look at your thoughts and
Mhm.
your beliefs about whether you think it's possible to dismantle racism.
Mhm.
Because I can tell you that one of the things that happens to me all the time for people who take my classes or if they're doing coaching with me, they'll say,
Mhm.
is it possible to dismantle racism?
Mhm.
And you know how we do it?
Mhm.
We do it one step at a time.
Mm. I was thinking that might be the answer. Yeah. Mhm.
Yes,
Right.
one
Step by
step at
step.
a time. And that old saying, how do you eat an elephant? Which I don't know why that's even a saying, but people say one bite at a time.
Mhm.
So, you know, we have to just do our part. So the self-image mindset,
Mhm.
going inward and
Yes.
taking a look, is saying, you know, why am I doing this? What are my
Mhm.
beliefs? What are my thoughts about it? And of course, I
Mhm.
use some psychological stuff in my book because why? Because I'm a psychologist.
Psychologist, sure.
And
Mhm.
so I talk about how we're conditioned. We're in a world where we're conditioned
Mhm.
in a racist system, but we're also conditioned even to believe that we can't do something. So we have to recondition ourselves. And then
Yes.
the third piece is about this shared movement, to know
Mhm.
and to understand that we're not dismantling racism by ourselves.
Mhm.
And that's why a company
Mm.
who has its values and
Mhm.
mission as racial equity, among other things, if you are treating everybody in your company as individuals who have a purpose
Mhm. Mhm. Yep.
and everyone is valued, you will understand each of us in the company is responsible for dismantling racism,
Mhm.
not
Mhm.
just the diversity, equity, and inclusion officer.
Committee, right? There also, yes.
Yes. So,
Mhm.
so what often happens is you'll have a DEI officer, and then
Mhm.
that officer doesn't have any clout to do
Right.
anything.
Yeah.
So they're not really living their purpose either. They may feel like they are,
Mhm.
until they get in the job and they realize that their hands are tied.
Yes.
So the really
Yes.
dismantling racism is about how do we heal? How do we go inward and heal? And
Mhm.
I will tell you, Eric, in the trainings that I do with people, particularly
Mhm.
the trainings that I do that are specifically healing separation from the inside out,
Mhm.
been 2 full days with the individuals that I'm working with,
Yes. Right.
taking them back to who they are,
Hmm.
helping them to remember who are they. Because, you know, Eric, you and I both know
Mhm.
people who just hate what they do. They hate their jobs. As a
Mhm.
result, they make everybody else's life miserable.
Sure,
So
having people like
my
that.
work
Yeah.
in healing this
Mhm.
racial, divide that we have,
Mhm.
take people back to who are you?
Mm.
Who are you?
Right. Yeah, it's an excellent question. I mean, so much goes out there, really, Charlie, and just like, that you said, wow, the why, right? Does this feed your soul? There's what's your purpose, right? What steps are you taking to align, say, your beliefs around racism with your actions, both in the company as an employee, as a manager, an employer, and in the world. And I think you can't separate those two, right? If
Right.
you're, out in the world doing this good work and you can bring it into your workplace, I definitely hear that, as well as the idea, just to note here, the fascinating stuff you're talking about, the idea of, just the motive and the selfish motive, but selfish not with the usual connotation that we have of that being wrong or bad, but more going inward, looking towards the self, like towards one's motives and values. And I love what you said about purpose can change and evolve. I mean, as an attorney, I represent companies, employers, business owners, small to mid-sized businesses here in New York State with compliance and litigation and consulting and transactions. But, I started out representing individual employees, and it was all in litigation, appeals, civil rights work, immigration law. And that was great and served the purpose for a while. But also the kind of the drain on the system of doing litigation appeals every day in, day out, just every day, with arguments, depositions, motions, more arguments, it became exhausting. And what I found is that, I can still have an impact in society by helping companies to follow the rules and align with the different, statutes. And also when they run afoul of it, defending them so that they don't lose their whole business. Maybe maybe in mediation, there's a healing process where they do recognize their part. And it happens more often than people realize. It's not always just a matter of, the company writing a check. Sometimes they do actually see where they went afoul of the law or where they misstep. And I've seen companies that genuinely want to change that. And I've seen ones that don't, right? That just, write a settlement check. To your point about throwing money at a problem. Okay, how much they want? Here's the check. Costs less than litigating. Now let's move on. And they go back to business as usual. And, I'll offer them the chance to have a conversation with me about these issues so that we can, maybe systemically change things. And the ones that take me up on that offer often don't come back for litigation defense. They come back for other issues. The ones that say, no, everything's fine, I did nothing wrong, often will call me back in 2 or 3 months about another employee and another employee, another. So I just, I echo everything you're saying, and I just add that perspective to it, in terms of purpose, changing.
I wanted to go back to something too that I said about the purpose changing.
Yes.
It's important for people to recognize. So whether we're talking about racism or anything else, when we think about our purpose, we're different people as we progress through life. You're different than you were 10 years ago or 5 years ago. Quite frankly, we're different even than we were last week, because we've met some people since last week that have probably changed our lives. We've had some interactions. Something has happened, that's different for us. And so we don't have to be so wedded to just one thing. We don't have to be wedded to what people thought we would be doing. That's why people change careers. In the middle of it, they'll say, oh my gosh, I was making so much money. I was in corporate, or I was doing this, or I was doing that. And then I just found that I wasn't happy with that. We are meant to be fulfilled. And I want to just say the other thing too about finding your purpose. Another thing that people can do, there are all sorts of assessment tools that are out here for helping us to determine what it is we enjoy in life, what it is we're really, really good at. Now, I do want to say there's some things that we're good at that we don't like doing. So then stay away from those things.
Sure.
Do it. And I don't think we should do things out of compulsion as well, or obligation as it relates to your purpose. That's all I want to say. Because some things in life we have to do. And there are ways, even though we are involved in things that are out of our control, so to speak, like if there's things that you have to do because there's downsizing in your company and you don't control for that, and you have to work in a position that you don't want to work in. There are ways, and I know we're going to have to take a break, but there are ways of even finding joy in the midst of doing the things that you don't want to do. And I would love for your listeners to hear, even if you're in a position where you are not being heard and where you are not being valued, you can make a strategic plan to decide how you will be heard or to decide whether you will leave. But if you know that you're in a position that you're working in that you don't like, until you can find a way of getting out of that position. There are
Mhm.
also things to do to make sure that you're happy in that
Yes.
position. And your attitude makes all the difference in the world.
That is such an important point, and it's so funny because I was gonna mention that in reference, and then you just launch right into it. It's a very true point. People listening tonight, whether you're the employee, who thinks, well, that's all great and all good, but I need this job to pay my rent and support my kids, and it's not that simple. That you can make a plan, but you can actually find ways to be happy where you are now and be purposeful. And for employers too, if you run a company and you feel as if you don't like what you're doing anymore, but you can't just close up shop tomorrow. Lots of times in life we have to look at the long picture and say, I don't like this job or this apartment or this whatever, this, situation, but I'm going to change it, but it takes time. But in the meantime, you can be purposeful, purpose-driven, and happy. And when we come back from our break, we have to take a commercial break here on Talk Radio NYC, Employment Law Today. I'm Eric Sauver, my host. I'm the host. My guest is Dr. Reverend Terlin Curry Avery, Reverend Doctor, sorry. It's been a long week already. Only Tuesday, it's been a long week. The Reverend Dr. TLC. Stay tuned. We'll talk more about this whole idea of purpose and bringing your life into harmony with what you're meant to do. So stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey, everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host a program, Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
In a post-COVID world, you may have many unanswered questions regarding your health. Are you looking to live a healthier lifestyle? Do you have a desire to learn more about mental health and enhance your quality of life? Or do you just want to participate in self-understanding and awareness? I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each Thursday, I will tackle these questions and work to enlighten you. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will be frank about health to advocate for all of us.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to Employment Law Today. I'm your host, Eric Sauber. I'm an employment law attorney here in New York State. I'm here tonight with my guest, the Reverend Dr. I'm going to say it correctly this time, Terlin Curry Avery, aka the Reverend Dr. TLC. I'm talking about her book recently, talking about a purpose-driven life in the employment context for employers and employees. And, Terlin, I just want to ask you in that regard, do you foresee, what changes might you foresee, let's say, trends, patterns in the workplace if employers shift towards focusing on their employees, on honoring their purpose, helping them to evolve their purpose? Like, how do you see that impacting the workforce today?
Well, it's interesting because I see it impacting the individual first and foremost, because we talked about the health-related issues, the medical, the physical, the psychological. I think that we would see a decrease, for one, in the health disparities, the health issues that we're seeing. That's one thing. But I think just in terms of the company itself, if people are happy, again, if the culture is one in which people feel secure in living their purpose, I think that you're going to see a company that really is a stellar company that's outshining many of the other companies that are out there, and they'll be able to say, this is our model. And then those companies would invariably be more concerned about what is happening in the community, right? So I think that there's a trickle down effect, so to speak, because if this company says, these are my values, I value my employees, the employees are going to come in and they're going to be thinking about, hey, what's happening within my own world? What's happening in my community? And they're going to take those issues to their company and say, hey, do you want to partner with the community to do X, Y, and Z? And so ultimately, I think it's something that benefits not just the company, but it benefits the world. And so that's what I think the trend is. And so if an employer really wants to practice what they preach and say, we're this company that cares about the world, then listening to their employees would be a start to there.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's a really good point, Carolyn. I think, and looking towards the future, the workforce is just changing so much. I mean, evolving, changing. There's just new ways of working. Look at the fact that, I can run a law firm, a law practice, and spend in my office 3 days a week and 2 days a week working from home. That would have been very rare to do just 3 or 4 years ago, or to have somebody work 2 days. And people are running whole companies like remotely. They're running them hybrid. They're hiring people in different fields. So my point is that there are all kinds of changes, and I think a lot of changes have also had to do with how companies look at the way that their workers are satisfied and happy. I think there's more of a push towards employee satisfaction, employees being seen and heard, and I think the companies that get that are the ones that will be successful, and the ones that don't are going to keep hearing phrases like great resignation, great reshuffle, and quiet quitting, and they'll be like, yep, that's my company, that's what's happening to me. But I think it comes back to all the things that you and I have been speaking about tonight, and everything from the why and your purpose, everything you said really is, I think, relevant here.
Yes.
We have probably down to that last couple of minutes or so, of the show. I know we got to a slightly later start, but what I like to do usually, I like to give my guests, a couple minutes to talk about what's going on for you in terms of any upcoming. Oh, there we go. Got the 3-minute mark. What's happening for you, Carolyn? Any upcoming shows, new books, events? How people contact you? The floor is yours.
Yes. I do want to encourage people to listen on Thursdays at 11 o'clock a.m. to the Dismantle Racism show. You can always catch it afterwards as well on Talk Radio NYC if for some reason you missed the live show. But in January, I have a 6-week program that's coming up. It's January 11th, and it's going to be for 6 weeks. The time is 11 o'clock to 12:30, where I actually will be teaching people how to recognize and respond to racism. The course is called A Blueprint to End Racism. So I give really concrete steps in there for how do you show up? How do you engage in this work of dismantling racism? But then after that, I am doing, after it ends, I'm doing a 2-day retreat on February 24th and 25th. You don't have to attend one to attend the other. But on February 24th and 25th, I'm going to actually be working with leaders and other individuals who are interested in learning, how do we heal separation from the inside out? How do we go back and take a look at our purpose and our why for engaging in this work? And how do we incorporate it into our everyday lives? So you can learn more about it by going to sacredintelligence.com, and you can register there, and you can also reach out to me as well going to that website, sacredintelligence.com.
Interesting. Wow. Good stuff, for our audience to listen to tonight, to think about. Yeah. Wow. Well, Carolyn, first off, I want to thank you so much for being a guest tonight. And as audience may or may not know, you actually filled in for someone that unfortunately couldn't make it. So you were right there on the fly, folks. She did this all, within like 15 minutes before the show started. And so I'm really grateful that we can have this conversation just from the heart, spontaneously speaking. Really terrific. And just, congratulations to you on the success of your book.
Thank you.
And you encourage everyone, you're welcome to get a copy and to go to Kevin's website for more information about that. And also say that if you enjoyed our show, if you like what you see, like what you heard, tell your friends, tell your colleagues, tell your families, members to tune in on Tuesday evenings from 5 p.m. 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on Talk Radio NYC, or you can catch us on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Amazon, and what's the other one? It's always one I would leave out.
Spotify?
Get that one. Stitcher, maybe it's Google Play. But in any event, I just want to thank everyone out for listening tonight and joining us. And a special thanks to you, Reverend Dr. TLC. I'm wishing everyone a wonderful night, a good rest of the week. And stay tuned for more great programming right here on Talk Radio NYC. So once again, just want to thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure, Trillian.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. So, all right, I guess we're at that hour. Thank you so much.